Okay, if we look at cholesterol and cholesterol interventions, have to admit that unlike what you've heard in the literature, oh, the cholesterol it doesn't matter what you eat, it's your genes. That is just completely not true. When you do an intervention to lower LDL cholesterol with a vegan diet, it's very successful in most cases. And the data is just a massive amount of it. And so it's only people who are pushing cholesterol consumption, such as the Egg Board or Cattlemen's Association, they're the ones going around saying that there is no relationship between cholesterol and what you eat. Nothing could be further from the medical truth. I'm going to talk about some of the patterns that we see, particularly for our audience. And I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and so when they say Southern diet, I'm thinking south of Roosevelt. Because that is exactly the kinds of things that we were eating on the south side of Chicago. And so, but being respectful to the authors, this was talking about, the Regards trial is talking about the Southern dietary pattern in the stroke belt. This is University of Alabama, Birmingham, but it's in northern cities as well. And what you see is a survivor plot over several years of adults with risk factors eating that Southern diet, which is like the fried chicken, putting ham hocks, neck bones in the greens, not yams, but candied yams, sugar sweetened beverages, and the like, and a lot of organ meats, the chitlins and the like. And if you eat these things for all of the reasons that I've been talking about for the last 30 minutes, you end up with this burden of heart disease, burden of kidney disease, and stroke. It turns out that we now have good amounts of data that what is it about that diet that kills people. So what you're seeing here is increase in deaths, and each one it has its own cut point. How much do you have to do in order to die? Well, for sodium, it's 2,000 milligrams a day, and so our recommendation of less than 1,500 makes sense. Not enough nuts and seeds. High processed meats. I hope everybody captures that high is defined as any, greater than 0. Okay, so processed meat, which would be like lunch meat, bacon, ham, hot dogs, sausages, they should essentially be never events in the human diet. Okay, not enough seafood. Why does seafood come out as a good thing? Because when you replace other types of red meat, particularly processed meat, with seafood, people do better. Doesn't mean that it's good for you. It just means that if somebody's going to force you to take cyanide or arsenic, you're better off with the arsenic. That's what this is saying. Not enough vegetables, not enough fruit. Oh, sugar sweetened beverages. How much is safe? 0. Okay, so I'm hoping that everyone will toss those right out of their refrigerator along with the bacon and the ham. Okay. Have to shout out to so many people nowadays who have changed their diet because of animal rights concerns or the society or greenhouse gases, and have gone to a vegetarian diet. But it's not a healthy vegetarian diet. There's juices, and they're juicing. A lot of people are thinking that it's helping them, but when you get rid of the pulp, you're actually taking too much sugar. Refined grains, taking a potato is great, but taking a potato and frying it is not so great. And so when you look at that all together as an unhealthful plant-based diet, you see an increase in death rate. And that dotted line, that hazard ratio, is actually worse than eating animals. And so you might be saving the environment, but not saving yourself. So hopefully people will understand that when we're talking about a vegan or vegetarian diet, we're talking about a whole food plant-based diet, not junk food. Okay. More data that was published just a few days ago talking about people not eating enough grains and eating refined grains instead, and seeing hazard ratios just to what you'd expect based on what I've mentioned so far. The more refined grains you eat, the more cardiovascular disease you're going to get. I'm going to spend the last few minutes talking about some of the damaging data that has come out with keto diets, because everybody's doing them to try to lose weight. They're very effective in causing weight loss. But if you just Google the phrase keto diet mortality, you see all this data come up. This is from Greece, saying it's a 22% increase in death. This is from Japan, saying that it's a 31% increase in death. This is from the United States, saying that it's an 18% increase in death if you do the red, if you're eating keto with animals, and an 18% decrease if you're doing it with plants. And so it's not the keto diet that's the problem. The problem is the animal products that you're using to do the keto diet. Okay, the more keto you are, the higher the death rate. And if you've had a heart attack in the past, the increase in your death rate of 53% is something no one really should be doing a keto diet unless it's done with plants. If you're trying to explain this to somebody, tell them this two things. And this is the lipids, which is your cholesterol, and the inflammation. And those markers are worsened significantly, and that's associated with increase down the road, heart attack, stroke, and death. And so the science is very clear. Their cholesterol, and some of my patients, the cholesterol would actually triple when they would do a keto diet doing bacon and eggs. So we have really good National Lipid Association folks who put together an article saying exactly what happens when you do this diet. And yeah, if you lose a lot of weight, your blood sugar will go down. And that's what they're bragging about, that it controls diabetes. Yeah, but at the cost of heart disease, it isn't worth it. What's the wrong with it? It's got eggs. And the more eggs you eat, the more you die. And so it takes only about a half an egg consumed per day to increase the mortality rate. And another publication from just a few weeks ago confirmed it in a completely different population. The more eggs and cholesterol you're eating, the more people die, and cancer mortality, not just cardiovascular disease. And it's something that everyone should be aware of because there's such great articles or advertisements saying that people should eat eggs when it really isn't true. The other side of it is the red meat. We've had this data for years. This is 2012, almost 20 years ago or 10 years ago, saying that the more red meat you eat, the more you die, and it's cardiovascular disease and cancer. That is dose related. And people who say moderation have to realize that the biggest jump in the death rate is between 0 and 1 serving per day. We have massive amounts of data from Harvard, the Physicians' Health Study, our Nurses' Health Study, all of them saying that there are no safe animal products. The best thing to do to substitute for red meat would be like soy protein and plant-based proteins and nuts and legumes. Those actually do work pretty well. Talk about the Mediterranean diet for a moment because it's very famous, New England Journal of Medicine. And it's one of the strangest things in my medical career where people will look at these survival plots and say, oh, look at that, controlled diet died this much. If you did the Mediterranean diet, you died this much. Well, they were actually talking about heart attacks, stroke, and death all together. And they're talking about a 30% reduction if you get rid of the red meat and go with extra virgin olive oil or nuts with fish and a little chicken here and there. Sounds good, right? Except for the panel B. Panel B has been there with every publication saying the same thing, that the death rate, the total mortality, wasn't different between the three diets. And if you blow up the right-hand table, what you see is that the big difference was in stroke. And if I was a neurology doctor, I'd feel pretty good about this. But as a cardiologist, noticing that the diet does not change the heart attacks, doesn't change cardiac death, and doesn't change all-cause death means that this is a worthless diet, and it shouldn't be labeled by U.S. News and World Report as the #1 diet for human health. Now, they're friends of mine too. And I kind of said, guys, you're talking about why didn't you look at a vegetarian diet? And they said, well, we kind of did. And they went back and analyzed their data. And I hope everybody captures this. This is that same data I just showed you, but it's turned on its side. And that is, instead of how people were randomized, they said, how many vegetables did you eat? And the people in the top quintile, as it's called, because they divided them into 5 groups, the top quintile actually ate the most vegetables, very little animal products. They had a 40% reduction in death. And so the Mediterranean diet works just fine, as long as you don't eat any of the animals. There are plenty of Mediterranean style foods, including the nuts and the olive oil, that seem to be associated with longer life expectancy as long as you don't eat the animal products. Okay, so last week there was a nice publication specifically about this, Mediterranean versus vegan. Congratulations to Neil Barnard, showing that a low-fat vegan diet did so much better for all of the risk factors and the weight. And I started this group at the nutrition group of the American College of Cardiology. So this, of course, was going back and forth between the Mediterranean people and the vegans, back and forth. Bottom line is, yeah, people did better with the vegan diet, and that's because it doesn't have animal protein. That's all there is to it. This data has been out there. Hopefully, everybody can just stare at this title for a moment, because you're going to laugh at this in a minute. Journal of American Medical Association, looking at that title, animal versus plant protein, showing that if you have any risk factors, doctors and nurses, then there are no safe animal products. Let me blow that up. That is, you will, the fish and the chicken and the dairy, 6 to 8% increase in death. Eggs would be worse than red meat. Processed red meat is worse than everything, okay? Well, here it is again, 3 years later, published same journal, same title, but this is from Japan, and it said the same thing. If you want to avoid cardiovascular disease, you avoid red meat, chicken, fish, and this decrease in death is for every 3% of plant protein that you substitute for animal protein. So then, whoa, they published it again? Completely different group. This is another National Institutes of Health data, same journal, same title. Again, just substituting in their model plant protein for animal protein, saying a decrease but it wasn't just heart disease. It was cancer as well, stroke, respiratory disease. Thus, and every red meat, every egg protein, they all contribute to death of our population, death and illness. Okay, so where should you get your protein? Well, turns out that if you want to have your best outcome and have the hazard ratios be on the left side, meaning that you've improved your outcome, what you really want to do to avoid heart attack and stroke and heart failure is to do plant-based diet. Now, I know everybody can't eat a tofu beast, but it's really important for everybody to recognize that vegetables do have a lot of protein, that beef and peanuts are the same, egg whites are less than quinoa, and soy and lentils and chickpeas actually have more protein than chicken. So people talking about eating animal protein to get their protein, it's just scientifically not true. And you end up with this compound, trimethylamine N oxide. Okay, so that is what happens when you eat animal products, and then you have your GI tract has bacteria in them that are really bad for you because you ate dead animals, and those bacteria make a compound that gets turned by your liver into trimethylamine N oxide. Please write down those 4 letters and look into it. By the time you're done Googling it, you will be a vegetarian, because it'll make you realize that it's making the plaque grow, rupturing the plaques, and then your platelets, which some of you have heard of, taking aspirin so your aspirin will stop your platelets from aggregating and causing heart attacks and strokes. Well, you're ruining your aspirin with your TMAO level is high because you ate animals. It also is associated with heart failure. And so the heart failure is important because we have data that says when you have heart failure, which is so ubiquitous in the Black community, particularly, you get about a 41% decrease in heart failure if you do a vegetarian diet. And so that plant-based diet decreases heart failure. The Southern diet particularly increases it. But we've had this data. It's not just our community. It's all over the world. The more processed and unprocessed meat you eat, the more heart failure you get. I want to focus just for a minute, because I want to leave some time for questions and answers about the microbiome. This is something that has all of a sudden became really important. The data I was showing you from Cleveland Clinic about the GI tract and the bacteria and eating dead animals, and the same bacteria that make that meat rot are actually inside your gut if you eat that meat before it rots. And you may cook it, but it still changes your microbiome. And it turns out that a publication just a few weeks ago indicated that it was the microbiome that was causing all the COVID illness. And so if people are eating a vegetarian diet, they have the GI tract bacteria that are actually more amenable to not having a ridiculous immune response and all that cytokine storm that people have, and the increase in the inflammatory markers that takes people out with COVID. So this is finally a good explanation of why it is that vegans don't tend to get serious COVID illness. They all get it if they're exposed, but they don't get very sick. And if anybody, please let me know if you know of one, a vegan who actually got hospitalized with COVID. So far, my count is 0. That doesn't mean it's safe. That means that you become an asymptomatic carrier. So please do the distancing and masking, because it's still a dangerous disease for somebody who's not a vegan.